what's your reaction to what the Stars have done in these playoffs, especially considering how much everybody was kind of hanging on for dear life at the tail end of the regular season?
Yeah, look, I mean, they're finally getting healthy. Miro Heiskanen was incredible in Game 6, but I think, for a lot of people, this is about Jake Ottinger. And I know that, Mikko Rantanen is the favorite to win the Conn Smythe, and I understand Miro's back and everything, but to me, this playoff run right now is about Jake Ottinger and what he's done, especially going up against Connor Hellebuck, who was, his rival American goalie, if you will, vying for the Team USA spot next year. And the way that Ottinger has played, the Stars have incredible depth, especially up front with their forwards and everything, but they haven't got production up and down the lineup. Jake Ottinger, especially with that save late in the game in Game 6, I mean, he is the reason why they were able to dispatch the Winnipeg Jets in 6 games. And I think for me, that's the biggest, and that's just the biggest storyline for me coming out of that series in particular.
Jonah, specifically, Game 6, though, I thought was also about Heiskanen finally getting his legs. Some of the plays he made up and down the ice on both sides of the puck were really impressive.
Yeah, and listen, this is something that Matt Duchene had been talking to us, about for days leading up to this series. Was when you lose your number one blue liner, it's like losing 2 to 3 of your top forwards in hockey because of how much time they spend on the ice, how much they control the puck, how much they really dictate everything that the Stars like to do, and especially when that blue liner is somebody of Miro's caliber. I mean, he was just so intrinsic to everything that they do. And so getting him back, yeah, I think there was some concern that how quickly is he going to adapt to the lineup? And I still don't think he's like fully back to that Miro that we have grown accustomed to seeing when he is at full strength. But they are starting to see the dividends of him being back in the lineup. Now they're just waiting to see Jason Robertson kind of take that step. And sea legs is really the term that I've heard in the locker room the most. It's really just you can't prep for it in practice because there really isn't much practice during the playoffs. It's you just kind of figure it out within the game, which is not always the easiest come playoff time.
Yeah, there's so much that is important about what they did on Saturday night to close out the series in 6, give themselves a few days of rest before Game 1 on Wednesday night, to give this team an opportunity to get just that much more healthy, especially in the form of Miro Heiskanen and Jason Robertson. This is a team that won 4 playoff games without Robo, won 6 playoff games without Miro, and now, theoretically, should have both of those guys pretty darn close to full go come Game 1 of the Western Conference Final against Edmonton. And oh, by the way, they beat the Avs and the Jets along the way to get here. This team looks super dangerous right now.
It's hard not to argue with that. I think the question, though, is they've been in this position a lot. Edmonton's the one that broke through last year, and they're facing a team now that is hungry in a way because they got close last year. And how much does that discrepancy change the dynamic entering this year, where there was basically Connor McDavid's breakout moment? Saad, I'm curious from your perspective, when you look at the difference this year, mentally, physically, between both of these teams as compared to last year's series, what's your main takeaway heading into it? What are you going to look forward to the most in Games 1 and 2 to kind of set the tone of this thing?
Well, I think the Stars are just better from top to bottom, and their depth speaks for itself. And, to go off of what Jonah was talking about with Miro, I think Mark Stone deserves some credit in a weird way for how good the Stars have been. Because for him, because Miro's injury, where I'm really getting at is Miro's injury put Thomas Harley in a spot where he had to take over the number 1 spot. And we've seen that throughout the playoffs, but we also saw it in the regular season. Pete DeBoer talked about it the other day. The Stars have turned to Thomas Harley to do so much. Now, we expect Miro to be Miro, but, when you ask me what's the difference between last year and this year, it's that you have Thomas Harley operating at such a high level, which I don't think happens if he's constantly in the shadow of Miro Heiskanen. And now you have 2 bona fide number 1 defensemen. And by the way, the other guys, especially their young guy, Leon Bichsel, is a quality guy as well. I just think their defensive group, remember last year, don't forget, throughout the playoff run, they were essentially playing with 5 defensemen because Pete DeBoer had no confidence in Nils Lundqvist to go out there and play quality minutes. So for Miro Heiskanen and Thomas Harley to be heading that defensive blue line for the Stars, to me, that's the big difference. especially against Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl.
I think the Stars are clearly better this year than they were last year. Obviously, just very easily point to Mikko Rantanen as a major upgrade for this team. But I think in totality, certainly what you're talking about, the depth of the blue line is a big part of that. I think Edmonton, though, is also better than they were last year. And if you look at the raw numbers, a lot of the raw numbers would suggest they're about the same as they were last year in terms of how often they score, some of the basic, the most base level metrics of what they do on the ice. But this is a team that doesn't feel like it's just Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl anymore. It feels like a team that has a little bit more depth to work with from top to bottom, and I think that's going to make them harder to deal with. I think Dallas has got a really strong case for being the better team in this series, but I think Edmonton is better than they were a year ago. Jonah, what's your read on this series?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Stars head coach Pete DeBoer said this after the game last night. I asked him kind of straight up about that, and he said, you know, we can look at last year, but it's not quite indicative of the Oilers team that we're about to face because they are deeper. They have more weapons, and that it's not just the McDavid and Draisaitl show that we were used to seeing for a number of years up in Edmonton. And that was it's a great point you make, Andrew, is that normally you kind of hope for that revenge factor in a series. And, for the Stars, there is that. Miro and Ottinger kind of alluded to it yesterday in their post-game remarks. But the Oilers are out for revenge, too. And McDavid, you just saw how he competed in that Cup final and getting that close. He is on a mission. And it's not only a dangerous team, but a generational talent on a mission is really scary. So that Stars defense, the goaltender, Otter, that is going to be the X factor in this series. The Stars offense has been the storyline really all year, but Otter and the blue line, if they can kind of, at least keep the Oilers attack in check relatively, they have a good shot of coming out of the series.
100%. Mike and I have talked about it a little bit, but off camera. Wyatt Johnston being the Stars' leading scorer at one point, at least the main offensive engine toward the tail end of the season. Great story, great for the kid. Can he match up with McDavid? Maybe with Mikko on his side playing the way he is now. Now we got something.
Jonah said a generational talent on a mission. Pete DeBoer might ask you, are you talking about Mikko Rantanen? Because he's been in a similar vein of late for sure.